So we're going to go live in about 5 minutes now. Just a huge welcome to everyone who's watching. We've got about 800 people who've tuned in so far. And Dina, I see we've been joined by Beryl Bean as well. And we're going to ask Beryl to start the video and to unmute and let us say good evening to them. And Jason looking much better now.
Right, Howard.
Good, fantastic.
All right.
So-
I want to ask Michael, have you been living in your garage?
I have. Really controversial, but I actually
And
didn't.
then ask you to start your video. As I start my video.
Yes,
No.
please, Beryl. We just
Right.
want to say good evening to you and welcome you onto the panel. It will be fantastic to see you. Hi, nice to see you. Welcome this evening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us. We're going to be discussing, I understand, your and your wife's challenges with COVID in a few minutes' time.
Yes, thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. We really appreciate you joining us. We wanted to have a great set of age disparity in the people between us. So I'm happy that you're bringing up the younger generation here. We've got a few older people on the panel like Tanya Demby. Tanya, you're going to have to represent the older generation this evening.
Perfect.
Okay, and we'll definitely make sure that Jason is representing the youth and the prepubescents. So Daniel, tell us, what is it like to be in medical practice at the moment? You could never have imagined that, in fact, you would land up in a situation like this. If I told you this 6 months ago, you would have thought I was completely insane. But I imagine never did you feel that you would be on the front line of a pandemic. And what's it like being a doctor today?
So Howie, I didn't sign up for this, eh? When I chose whether or not to become a doctor, infectious disease was always the thing I didn't opt for. It wasn't my area of choice. And had I known, I probably would have chosen a much more glorious job. Besides the fact that we all look like we butchers at work today, the way we dress, I wouldn't call it fun, but it's got a lot more meaning than usual, that I continue. And if you had asked me months ago whether I thought we were going to be in this situation today, I would have said no way. And I was one of the people watching the stats coming out of China and interested in, I would have said no way. So it is, I can't say it's boring. It's interesting. It's, I feel like we're doing a lot for people, which is a really amazing place to be in, but it's hell of a stressful as well. So yeah, it's a good mix. I don't know if Lana feels the same way because she does the same job as me, and we basically doing the same thing in the same area. So yeah.
So Lana, did you ever imagine when you started studying medicine that this is the way it could land up?
No, definitely not. I thought I was going to be a cardiologist.
But guys, I want to know, you did a great video. I
Hearts and
believe
do
that was
echoes all
your-
day long. What's that, Gina?
So I said the video that you guys did was absolutely awesome. I only saw it on one of the webinars. I hadn't seen it before. It was very, very impressive. What inspired you? It was you, Dr. Israel. Did you start that?
Yeah, I started it, but it was a group effort. It was just we went through a stage where the practices were quiet. Well, they still are to a lot in some ways, and we just needed a creative output and a way to show people that we were there, still there for them. And we just had a lot of fun. And I mean, Lana's always told me she could sing and she can, and it was like a good way that for her, for example, we could see that, and it was really great. This was the best part of the last few months.
Yeah,
So Rael Simpkin, I'm not quite sure what you're doing on our panel, but I'm going to remove you from the panel if you don't mind.
I think it's a panel too early.
I think someone may have shared their link with Rael.
So Rael was helping Beryl to just sort out his Zoom. So maybe it was something to do with that.
Okay, so we've put Rail back into the audience. The time is 7:01. We're going live in exactly 1 minute's time. A huge welcome to everyone, and let us know where we are. I see we've got people from New York and Atlanta, and some people from Durban, and people are asking me whether I have the flu. And no, I definitely do not have the flu, but both Dan and I are trying out tonight Shure microphones, proper professional microphones you can see over here. We're trying them out, and I believe it's dropped me an octave or two. But we're using these remarkable little headsets that you can't even see in our ears. And this, I'm told, is actually what I should be sounding like naturally, whether I like it or not. So welcome to the guys from Atlanta, welcome from Sea Point, New York, and Durban. Great to see you all. I see we've got a lot of Cape Townians watching. We've got Gavin Meltz in Cheltendale. A huge welcome to you, Gavin. I think you've been on all of our webinars as we've gone through all of this. So welcome to all of you all over the world. The time has just gone 7:02. Dan Stillerman, welcome to you. You are in fact going to be hosting tonight's panel, are you not?
Yeah, thank you very much, Howie. I wonder if it's doing the same with my voice. I've also got this this new microphone. Thank you to the guys at Shure. So I don't know if it's dropped me an octave or two. But yeah, excited to be here, and welcome and good evening to all the panelists. And doctors and specialists on the panel. I think it's going to be a really interesting and important conversation.
So Dan, you've got your South African buff. I've actually got my Shure microphone buff that I'm wearing tonight. I could go out and rob a bank straight after this. So just a huge thank you to Shure for these microphones and the headpieces. And let's hope that we'll be broadcasting really loud and really clear. So it's 7:03, and on behalf of the South African Jewish Report, I just want to welcome everyone this evening. We've had a huge response, more than 1,500 people pre-registered, and I see we've got more than that number already actually watching our show this evening. So a huge thank you on behalf of the South African Jewish Report to all of our panelists this evening, to Dr. Daniel Israel, to Peter Klein-Fagan. The two of you are going to be helping Dan Stillerman get people to tell their stories, speak about what's happening with COVID, telling people about recoveries and symptoms and hope and inspiration. And that's really what tonight is about. But I think at this point in time, every single one of us know tens, if not hundreds of people within our own community who have tested positive. And it's really important for us to understand the disease, how it's manifesting within our own community, and how people are recovering from this as well. So on behalf of the South African Jewish Report, a huge welcome. This is Dan, number 36, if I'm not mistaken, 35, 36 panel?
35, Howie.
35. Panel number 35. And in fact, the next panel takes place on Wednesday. So Dina Diamond, thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you, Howie, and it's great to be on another one of our panels. I swear they just get better and better, so I'm so excited. So on Wednesday evening, we are running a panel called Investment in Crisis, and we're going to be looking at investing pretty much in exactly the pandemic that we're in. We're going to be looking at the stock market. We're going to be looking at equities. We're going to be looking at asset class. We have got amazing panelists that are going to be on with us. We've got Cy Jacobs from 361. We've got Jared Khan all the way from London, from Credo. We've got Stephen Herring also from London and from Harriet. Peter Armitage from Anchor Capital, Chris Holdsworth from Investec. We have got a full lineup of people who are going to help and guide us through. I think everyone at this moment doesn't know where to put their money. Should they be keeping it in South Africa? Should they be looking at offshore options to diversify? Should they be looking at equity? Should they be looking at property, unit trust? So we are going to have an amazing, robust discussion on Wednesday evening. So I would suggest everyone to tune in, because these people, we can't just get them every single day, and to have them on all at one time is an absolute win. So absolutely going to be a great panel, 8 o'clock on Wednesday evening, the 15th.
Fantastic, Dina. Thank you so much. And to everyone watching, just a reminder that you have a number of buttons at the bottom of your screen. So if you want to chat to people and chat to everyone around you, please feel free to click on the button that says chat, and you'll be able to post something and everyone watching will be able to see. But if you have a specific question for either our psychologist or alternatively our doctor or any of the panelists, that's why we have a Q&A button at the bottom. And we will allow, in fact, all of you to ask questions both to our professionals as well as our patients this evening. So if you want your question actually answered, please feel free to click on that Q&A button. I will be behind the scenes controlling all the buttons, the things that Dan normally does, and Dan will be doing my role this evening, talking to you. And so with that, I'm going to turn my camera off and I'm going to hand over to Dan. Good night, and I'll see you a little later.
Thank you, Howie, and welcome once again to everybody. It's great to have you with us on the Sunday night for panel number 35. And I'm going to ask all of the panelists / patients to turn their videos off for now, because we're going to kick things off this evening by crossing over to Dr. Daniel Israel, who I've known for many years, back from B'nai Akiva days. Many people know Dr. Israel. I'm sure many of his patients are watching in the audience. And he's at the Bluebird Medical Center here in Johannesburg. And yeah, we're going to kick things off by crossing over to Daniel and just getting an update from the front line, you know, in 5 minutes. How are you finding things on the ground, you know, with your patients? What are the biggest challenges right now? Obviously, the numbers have surged. You know, we're all pretty well aware of the curve and the direction that the curve is going in. What have some of your personal challenges been, and what can you share from your side? You mentioned to me during the week that you like to look at things from a biopsychosocial perspective. So what's on your mind right now?
Thanks, Dan. It's great to be here with everybody. So I was thinking today, every medical webinar that I've ever seen starts off with statistics, and I'm wondering why. I thought about it hard, and the reason why is that it gives an understanding of the seriousness of the situation. So I really believe that tonight's medical seminar is going to be webinar is going to be different to all others, but I think it's important to understand where we're at. So let's just understand there are almost 13 million cases in the world as of today. There's 567,914 deaths there have been across the world. South Africa had its first case on the 5th of March this year, and almost 4.5 months later, we now on 264,184 cases. We've had almost 4,000 deaths in South Africa. And the scariest part, Dan, I think, is that we're seeing between 11,000 and 13,000 infections a day coming through in our country. Just so that we all understand, again, the gravity of the situation, we're the 4th highest rate of infection rise in the world at the moment. And our doubling time in South Africa, which means how long it takes for the infections in our country to double in number, is 14 days. So that means 14 days ago, there were half the number of infections there are today. And in 14 days time, there'll be double, and 14 days after that, double that, which means that within a month from now, we could be looking at 1 million infections in South Africa. So we really are deeply, deeply impacted as South Africans. For those of us in Gauteng, which is probably the majority of us on the webinar tonight, we've got just over 93,000 cases as of today in Gauteng. 31,000 in hospital, 315 ICU, 187 on ventilators. So it really is a very serious situation. On a personal level, as a doctor, you know, in the first few weeks of the lockdown, when we all went out there to flatten the curve, I'm privileged to be on a WhatsApp group with a whole lot of us who speak every day. And we literally used to speak and say, have you seen a case this week? Has anyone seen a case this week? We're now all seeing 4, 5, 6 and plus cases every day coming through our practices, and that's this week. I mean, it will go up week by week. So, you know, on a personal level, you asked me how it's impacting me. Every day, my practice is really primarily about COVID at the moment. Even though we're still having to deal with patients in terms of normal things, it's about who has COVID, who doesn't, who's a risk, who should come in, who shouldn't, who should be tested. And these are the questions that as a community, we're all grappling with every day, but as doctors, even more so. I thought just part of this 5 minutes introduction, it would be important to delineate a few interesting things about COVID. When COVID started, we saw it as a respiratory virus. We know COVID affects your lungs, right? It would affect your airway. We're seeing more and more that COVID is much more than a respiratory virus. It enters the body through the mouth and the nose, and it basically enters your cells through what's called ACE receptors, which are little receptors on your cells where the COVID can attach. But more than this, we have ACE receptors in various systems in our body. So we're seeing in patients, and we're seeing in the hospitals, how patients are presenting with strokes and with what we call thromboembolic disease, which is clotting in the lungs, in the brain, in different vital organs, all from this virus, which is a unique picture that we haven't seen with other diseases. We're seeing in the GIT, and I've seen this in my own practice, how we've had patients who have presented with nausea and diarrhea, and we can't find a reason for it. And it's more than just a normal bug. And after a little bit of time, when we do a test, we realize they actually have COVID. So this virus is really confusing and confounding even the sharpest of clinicians. I think what's really important, though, just to make this webinar special, is to understand, to keep this COVID in its perspective, and to make sure that we understand how it impacts us as a community and how it doesn't. It's important to understand that 85% of people who get COVID, roughly 80 to 85%, will get a mild disease, a mild illness presentation. Some may, a big percentage, be asymptomatic. They enter what's called the viremic stage, where they just have mild symptoms of fever, loss of appetite, possibly some loss of taste and smell, and they feel bad, they feel tired, it's not something we would want to happen to anyone, but they get over it. It takes a week or so and they start to feel much better. There's a smaller percentage, about 15%, who will get complications, so to speak, called the pneumonic stage of the virus after that. And that can be really pneumonia. It's COVID pneumonia in the lungs. And there's an even smaller percentage of those people, which is about a third of them, who will land up needing real intervention in terms of their airway, high care, ICU, etc. Now, what's really interesting, I think, for the people watching tonight is, what are the questions that we as doctors are getting on a daily basis? The first most frenetic and panicked question we're getting is, are there going to be enough beds for our community? I was privileged to listen to Dr. Richard Friedan this afternoon, as many of you did, and just speaking to some of the experts out there. And the hospitals are under pressure and they're really full. But there's been a collaboration between the hospitals, both in private and in public. And really, there's no reason to panic at the moment that there won't be enough beds. At the beginning of COVID, the way it was managed overseas is, as soon as a patient's oxygen saturation, so that's their level of oxygen as measured on their finger, dropped below about 93, 94%, the decision was often made to what's called intubate them. So put a pipe down into their airway and put them onto a machine that would breathe for them. But then when studies have found that the outcomes of intubated patients haven't been great, and only in exceptional circumstances do we decide to intubate where the outcome will be favorable. So it's been found that the majority of patients, even with low saturations, can be managed well with what's called nasal cannula oxygen, where we put oxygen into their noses. And we might even run this oxygen at high flow rates of up to 60 liters a minute. So that really means that not every patient who needs to go to hospital for COVID is going to land up in ICU or high care. And that should allay a lot of anxiety. Another question we're being asked a lot is there enough oxygen in South Africa? And the truth is that the supplies of the oxygen have run into problems, and there is shortages of oxygen, but strategies are being made to make up for that. And we're seeing those strategies being put into place, and optimistically, we're hoping there will be enough oxygen. Dan, I'm wondering would you like me to carry on with a few of the more frequently asked questions for the next minutes, or should we leave that for the frequently asked, for the quick Q&A at the end?
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. I think let's get some perspectives from Peter. I think when we hear the stories and the experiences from each of the patients, as well as the Q&A at the end, we'll deal with a lot of those issues. But thank you. Thanks for those insights. And seriously, well done. And big ups to you, Dr. Israel, for all the amazing work that you've done in and around this very challenging time. Peter, you help people navigate life and trauma and challenges from a psychological and emotional perspective. And I mean, these challenges that people are facing right now are just, you know, everybody knows
So
it's an
huge.
unprecedented time, and the challenges are so, you know, so pronounced. So, things are so uncertain. So, I mean, what are some of the main themes and main challenges that you're helping people to navigate right now, and some of the insights that you can share just as an introduction?
So the biggest thing that I'm seeing is this helplessness and hopelessness. It's also this understanding that our locus of control is being completely challenged. We all feel safe when we can control our worlds. And this has completely gone out of control all over the world. So it's a very, very interesting and challenging time because everybody's grappling with their version of control and finding that they're potentially hooking into different kinds of neuroses and finding themselves in cycles that are not serving them. So I'm dealing a lot with that in my private practice, but I'm also dealing with people's real deep loneliness. And it's quite an interesting thing because they could be within a family structure with, you know, 4 kids at home and in a marriage, there's still this deep, interesting loneliness. And it comes from the two joining, the lack of control and feeling disconnected, feeling that deep pain of not knowing where they should be, how they should be, the moral dilemmas that they're facing. Should they test? Shouldn't they test? Should they go to the restaurant? Should they go to the shops? All of these things are actually creating enormous amounts of anxiety and angst. And it's a very hard thing to navigate. For those of you who know me, I am an avid Brené Brown fan, if not a groupie. And she advocates that life is about connection and a sense of belonging. And the minute those two things become threatened, we really feel lost. And I think tonight it's about really joining everybody's understanding of our sense of belonging. We have an unbelievable community, an unbelievable support system. And it's about just switching that mindset on to move some of the things that we may come across from the stories that our panelists will share, and just shift some of the stigma stuff, to shift some of that disconnecting and start understanding what it means to lead with empathy, real empathy. So that's my 2 cents worth for now. You there, David?
Great, thank you, Peter. So now what we're going to do is we are going to ask Nikki Shankman to start her video and to unmute herself. Let's give it a moment and let's welcome Nikki. There you are. How are you doing, Nikki?
I'm good, thanks, and you?
Good, good. Thank you. We haven't met, but I'm looking forward to hearing your story. So yeah, over to you. We'd love to hear your story, your experience, your insights, some of the lessons that you've learned. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a stopwatch, which is not going to count down and not going to cut you off at 10 minutes, but it's just going to help us to keep track of time because we do want to keep it roughly to 10 minutes per story. So I'll start that shortly.
Perfect. So my story started where my husband was diagnosed with COVID. He did have a cold, he had a sore throat. He did go to a doctor and he was put on an antibiotic, said, you are not COVID positive, you don't need testing at this stage. He continued to work, everything was fine. There were a few changes, but tired, sore throat, coughing. Unbeknown to my family, he actually took himself off like 5 days later to be tested. And he phoned me on the Wednesday to say, where are you? I said, I'm at the shops. He said, get home, I've got COVID. I couldn't believe it. So we went through, should we isolate, should we do this? But he had already had it for a while. So our family chose just to all be together. In our family, I was positive. My son was positive, but he was asymptomatic. My eldest son was negative. My daughter was inconclusive. And the lady who worked for us, unfortunately got the sickest of us all. My husband kind of breezed through it. My son, who was asymptomatic, you didn't even know he was sick. And the lady that works for us, she was also very sick. And every single one of us had completely different symptoms. I mean, we were not the same. It wasn't like we had COVID. I did not have a cough. I did not have a sore throat. I am asthmatic. What I did find that when I was walking upstairs or going from one room to another, I was very short of breath, but not that I felt that I needed oxygen. When you take an asthmatic pump, you breathe it in, you hold in for 10 seconds for obvious reasons. If I tell you that I could not wait to breathe out, it was very difficult to hold my breath. It's saying that, and I'm sure Dr. Israel and Lana might not agree with me, but I honestly believe that I think that asthma pump actually helped my breathing in the end. And as I said, it's just a personal opinion. So the days went on, I was fine and I was okay. And, you know, I was feeling tired and lethargic. And then all of a sudden I thought, yeah, I'm coming out of this. And it just hit me. The body pains, the headaches, then I started with the gastro. I started vomiting. I started with the diarrhea. I had pains shooting through my body that I kept saying, this can't be COVID. Being a mother, you didn't want to show I didn't want to show my children how sick I actually was, but there were days I was curled up in a ball. I couldn't get off the couch. I couldn't walk. I couldn't, the only thing I could do that I kept saying to myself, but you can breathe. You can breathe, get up, get up. As I don't know if any of you saw, I did write something on Facebook, because what did affect my family was that people were not talking about this. You'd hear that, oh, well, I'm better now, I don't want to say anything. But we felt that people needed to actually tell people that it's okay. It's okay to have this COVID, and that the fact that all of us had completely different symptoms was a reality. I can tell you that in all those symptoms I had, one day I thought I had meningitis, then I thought I had encephalitis, I thought I had gastro, and I did land up in hospital, not for long, thank God. And they put me on a drip because I was so weak that I don't even remember actually going to hospital. I went in the back of, as we all know, these angels, Hatsola, took me there, those nursing staff and those doctors. And I don't think the doctors on this panel are actually being modest towards themselves. Guys, I have never seen anything. I am in the medical profession. I haven't worked for years, so I have worked in a hospital. It was like out of a movie. It was, you watched all those pandemic movies, it's exactly like that. They are tense, everything is divided. But for me, what stuck out the most is that they see this every minute of the day and they still have the compassion for you. They are kind, they are wonderful to you. It's not, oh, another COVID patient, okay. And I don't need oxygen, thank God. I never landed up being admitted, but every 5 minutes, the nursing sister would come up to me and say, let me help you up. She could feel that I did not have that energy to sit up, and my breathing was fine. The other thing that we experienced in my family was this, who gave it to you? Where did you get it? How did you get it? You've been so vigilant. My husband is fanatical about from day one, and he got it first, so we all assumed he gave it to us, and the guilt and anxiety that he felt towards us. And it isn't like that. It doesn't matter where you get it from. It doesn't matter how you got it. And the most important thing is we're all fine, we're okay. I still get a bit tired in the afternoons now. I still have a bit of a stiff neck, but I'm well and I'm healthy and I can stand up and I can walk and I can talk. But I can tell all those listeners out there, it is scary. And as I said to you, I never got to a stage where I couldn't breathe, but those symptoms are real. I don't know how the other patients feel, but I'm clear to leave my house and I'm free because I'm not contagious anymore, but I'm not going anywhere. I am staying at home because that's how I feel. I am still in the stages where I'm dealing with, am I going to get it again? Am I not going to get it again? There is so much that does go through your head. And I'm just grateful that I'm okay. And most important to all those medical doctors and nurses and physios, physicians, you guys are, thank God, there to get us through this. Because if it wasn't for you, I don't know where we would all be.
Nikki, your story is so touching. It has so much meaning just for the people even watching tonight who are sitting with a COVID infection themselves. Firstly, just the way you express the gratitude to Hatsola and the community for what they've done, just brought like a lump to my throat. But so our community knows. I mean, Hatsola has a program that was devised by Uriel Rosen. They've had 430 patients on it as of tonight, and 280 patients still active on it tonight. They've admitted 10% of the patients, and 5% of them are on home oxygen. And it's so wonderful to hear a story like yours, where you were able to be looked after through that program. Also, I hear such an interesting theme coming through in what you're talking about in terms of the stigma that you faced or didn't face with this diagnosis. And it's something that we've seen so much, the people dodging tests or taking tests, wanting to tell people that they're positive, not wanting to tell people they're positive. And also after having had COVID, whether people in our community have felt that once you've had the infection, are they able to go out into the community and be accepted as having recovered, or do they feel as though they're still stigmatized and almost blamed? So I know Peter has some thoughts about this, and you've touched on such important things. So let's ask her what she feels about that.
So yes, Nikki, thank you for sharing this story, because I can hear it takes a hell of a lot of bravery and courage, considering all the pool of emotions that you went through all of this. It sounds really terrifying. You know, there's something very fascinating about blame. You know, it's quite interesting. In my line of work, whenever I've done other trauma work with hijackings or anything, one of the first questions people ask is, where were they? Where were they? Okay, and it's such a fascinating question, because we ask that because we actually want to be so removed from where the incident happened, because then it's like a little bit okay, right? It's human nature. It's just human nature that we do that. And it's a similar thing that's happening here. Well, how did you get it? Where were you? How many people have you been in touch with? And I love so much what you said, Nikki, that it doesn't matter, right? Because blame, actually, if we look at the definition, blame is the discharge of discomfort. So we feel uncomfortable within ourselves and we need to put it somewhere. And then we place it onto other people and we look for that thread just to kind of make us feel a bit better, right? So I think that the biggest challenge in all of this is actually stopping at the point of that blame and going, hold on a second, I'm obviously feeling uncomfortable. How can I deal with these emotions that will aid the healing process? Because the stigma stuff is very hard, you know, and as you've raised, and the guilt and all of those really large emotions. So thank you for sharing that with us.
And, you know, our community, I don't think it's only a community. I think people want to find out how you got it, or what, like, where did you get it from, so that maybe they won't do what you did, because it's human nature. They don't want to get it from how you got it, because then they can prevent themselves, which is true. But guys, you're going to get it no matter, you might not get it, but if you're going to get it, you will never figure out where you've got it from. And my family and my friends, and they were amazing. They took over my household. The food came. The caller that phoned me from Hatsola, he would phone 3 times a day. Even when I was that sick, he still made sure that I was okay. And the compassion and if I can even say the love. And I'm blessed that we have our community to look after each other. Calls that I didn't even know people who they were. The gifts, the food, my family was so looked after. And
amazing.
I can tell you that if anyone ever needs anything, please, you're more than welcome to email me, get my number from Howard. I will be there, because I'm not contagious. I will be there, will personally make your family a meal and look after you, because this is proper, not a fun disease to get.
What you've just described, Nikki, is empathy and compassion. It's really seeing people, really feeling people, and noticing what they have been through. And I think that should be quite a big takeaway message from your bravery in sharing your story tonight, is that let's stop with the guilt and the blame and all that stuff, and start connecting to seeing what people are going through and
Correct.
continue being there for them.
Yeah.
Thank you, Nikki.
Pleasure.
Can I interject with a few questions that have come in from members of the audience? The first is actually a comment from the CSO in Cape Town to say that the CSO in Cape Town is running an almost identical program to Atsola in Johannesburg. So if you do have any symptoms or if you have been diagnosed with COVID positive within the Cape Town area, please contact the CSO and they will look after you. So please take advantage of that. Another comment comes in from Jody Rakusen that says they have an apartment available. If anyone is in need of a place to isolate, they are willing to give their apartment for a 2-week period to anyone who needs a place to isolate away from other people as well. You can contact me if you in fact need a place to stay to isolate away from your family. But Daniel, questions have come in about some symptoms and people just want some clarity. Is diarrhea, nausea, vomiting part of the symptoms that people are actually experiencing during COVID? And can you speak to as well the issue of exhaustion? A number of people have commented or asked questions about if they're feeling more tired than usual, if they're feeling exhausted, if they're having difficulty getting up, is it potentially something that they have COVID as well?
Thanks, Howie. So let's go to the second part of the question first. Exhaustion is definitely part of this virus. It's part of the viremic phase, and it's one of the common symptoms. The question that you're really addressing is, if I wake up in the morning and I feel tired, should I, for a few days in a row, should I go for a COVID test? And that question can be expanded, because you can say the same thing about if I have a runny nose, if I have a sore throat. I think that given the shortages we have of tests as a whole, and given the difficulty we have in that we still want to test people and isolate them, a practical approach here would be stay at home, quarantine yourself or isolate yourself. And if you have more than one positive symptom that is quite indicative of coronavirus, i.e. headache, sore throat, difficulty breathing, pain behind your eyes, definitely loss of taste or smell, and I'm going to say abdominal pain, nausea, and diarrhea, then go for a test. To visit the first part of your question, so the virus attacks any cells in your body that have ACE receptors, and there are ACE receptors in your gastrointestinal tract, in your GIT. So without getting too technical, because the cells there are receptive to the virus, there are patients who get COVID in their gastric system. So it's not the common presentation, but it is something we're seeing. So if you have more than a long bag that is just, or a different bag to what you used to, you should speak to your doctor and consider it as a cause of COVID being a cause, yes.
Dan, last question, and then I'm going to butt out again. Someone says, evening, I tested positive on Friday, and yesterday my wife started showing all the same symptoms. Does she need to test, or do we just accept that she's positive?
So the more common question we get there is if someone's been in contact and they don't have symptoms, should the family test? And the short answer to that is no. We only test symptomatic patients at the moment. In a case like that, it is preferable to test. We're still trying to keep our statistics in this country good, and we want to know how many cases we have, and we have the ability to test. That said, if it isn't going to glean more information and it's difficult for the person to test, we are okay if they stay at home and treat it supportively, provided that they are isolating and that they haven't been in contact with other people. If they've been in contact with other people, then from a social responsibility perspective, and that we're going to talk about more, what are the social responsibilities around COVID, you should go and test.
Great. Thank you, Daniel. And thank you to Nikki. Truly a story of bravery and courage, and so many messages of love and care and support coming into the chat. I don't know if you've had a look, but you can take a look there, and it's wonderful to see all the support coming from the audience. So thank you. So what we're going to do now is we're going to ask Beryl Bean to start his video and to unmute himself. So Beryl, you should get a message on your screen asking you to start your video. So whenever you're ready, and we're going to hear from Beryl. Let's give Beryl a moment. Welcome, Beryl.
Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening. We'd love to hear your story and your experience.
Well, before I go any further, I'd just like to thank Atsola. This past 2 weeks, they've just been unbelievable. The 2 calls a day were just tremendous. And I'd also like to thank the support system we've had with people who were just worried about us, bringing us food, and it's just been marvelous. Now, to go on to it, about 3 weeks ago, I had a couple of, my body was very sensitive and so on and so forth. And I went to see Dr. Israel. And he examined me and he said, I didn't have COVID symptoms, but my temperature was a bit high. And he put me on antibiotics for a high respiratory infection. And naturally, I had bad thrush. Where I got that from, I don't know. Anyway, by the Friday, my wife, Lynette, started feeling cold. She was coughing a lot. And they arranged for her to go for a test. She was proved positive. On the Sunday, they said, I must go for the test. My body was cold. And I was feeling tired and so on and so forth. And I came out positive. Being cold, fatigue. I kept them saying I was weak because I still try to do everything. You know, do the washing and hang it up. And while I was hanging it up, I was saying I was getting so tired hanging it up. But I think it was more whether I was weak or lack of breath. And I also realized after a while, if you're tired, go and lie down and get into bed. Don't try and push it. And all I can say, today is my 13th day. I woke up, I was a new man. I went out and fetched the bin from outside, cleaned the bin, worked on the pool for 2 hours. And I don't know, it's just been a big change and I'm feeling wonderful. I must also mention, in the first week, I lost 6 kilograms because food just didn't taste good. I didn't eat much and I was very worried being an emphysema sufferer. But at this stage, I feel I've passed the best. The worst.
Thank you so much, Beryl. So Beryl is such an example for all of us of someone who is 77 years old and has a comorbidity of emphysema and has managed to get through this virus. I spoke to Beryl last night and he told me how much better he was feeling. And I think a real take-home lesson to get out of Beryl's story is it's so important for us not to approach this time with fear. We know that people with comorbidities complicate more, but it's important to understand that even if you are older, even if you're older than 60 or 65 and with a comorbidity, it doesn't mean that if you get COVID, you're going to die from COVID. If you look at Beryl, his positive attitude, and he's just one example of the many patients we're seeing, has really taken him through this, and he's done incredibly well with that. While we're on comorbidities, it's really important to mention that this is the most important time, if ever, to get your comorbidities under control. We've seen from the studies overseas that if you have diabetes, hypertension, obesity, various comorbidities, and we can go through the others later, but it's important that you see your doctor and that you get these under control, because we know that patients who have controlled diabetes do better than patients with uncontrolled, same for hypertension, etc. But Beryl is a shining example of someone who who really has gotten over this, thank God. And may he go from strength to strength.
Hello, if I could just mention,
Go ahead, Beryl.
if I could just mention, it's very important to take all the vitamins that are given by the doctor. Very important. And I must say, I went through times, my joints were sore, my back was sore, but I said, I'm going to get over this. And as I say, I feel so much better.
That's amazing, Beryl. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. And I think you've definitely given us a good example of how also listening to your body and being kind to yourself. If you're feeling tired, as you said, go and rest. Don't push through it because it's not going to help. And a positive mindset, we've always said, you know, your thoughts determine your cellular activity. So if we have that positive mindset, we're able to actually kick this virus a little bit faster. Thank you for sharing with us, Beryl.
May I interject with a few questions that have come in? Peter, maybe we can start with you. Someone has messaged me and said, in their workplace, there are a lot of people just not wearing masks.
Sure.
And they don't quite know how to react to this because they understand that their safety is dependent on other people actually adhering to the rules relating to masks. What recommendations would you give to someone on how to manage it, how to handle it with their colleagues, with the people that they see when they're going for a run or going for a walk as well?
You know, I think that when it comes to the issue of wearing masks, it should be a non-negotiable. You know, and if this person is battling with that work environment, there has to be a meeting that's held. There has to be attention to what the law stipulates. You know, you see everywhere you go, no mask, no entry, and nobody should ever feel that their safety is threatened. It's a very serious thing. I can only imagine that feeling of going into that workplace and feeling unsafe every single day. Your productivity is going to plummet. You're not going to be able to feel comfortable being in that work environment. So, you know, my thing is, I personally wear the surgical mask, the surgical mask from Dis-Chem. And the reason is because I feel double up. I'm protecting me and I'm protecting someone else. So if they are in this instance where they are met with stubborn people that aren't wearing their masks, which is ridiculous at this stage in the game, maybe to double up on their own, you know, security with that kind of a mask. But I think Daniel could answer that a little bit better than me. But I really think that is something that needs to be taken up in that workplace. It shouldn't be allowed that.
Well, let's quickly pose two questions which have come in many, many times from people who are watching. Daniel, the first question is, do we know yet what this means that it in fact is an airborne disease? What additional precautions should we be taken now that science seems to be moving in that direction? That's question number one. And the second question before I log off out of the section is, do we understand yet whether in fact, if you've had the disease once, whether you have immunity? Is it potentials? There's some people who posting who believe that they've now got it for the second time.
Thanks, Howie. So there are a group of scientists over in Europe who have been looking at studies as to how airborne this disease is, this virus is. And at this point, we do not believe that the transmission of this virus is airborne. That is despite the fact that in the media, you might have seen last week that there was statements saying that now this virus has become airborne. I spoke to a couple of the leading experts from the NICD about this afternoon, is that this virus is still a droplet spread virus, and the airborne part of it is only an aerosoling procedure. So when a patient coughs really hard or sings a choir practice, a procedure to make a high velocity flow out of the mouth, in that kind of case, this virus might be airborne, which by the way also includes nebulizing. So a sick patient who nebulizes in the presence of another patient in our home with more than one person, that would be a problem. There it's airborne. Other than that, this is a droplet spread virus to the best of our knowledge, and that's how the World Health Organization still holds, which is why, going on what Peter said, it is so important that masks are worn. Masks protect the people who are around the person wearing the mask. The primary protection is from the person wearing the mask, not protecting the person wearing the mask. And that is why it's a social responsibility to wear a mask. Howie, on your second part question about reinfection, the bottom line of this answer, and I've read quite a lot about this, is we don't know. We actually don't know how long immunity to COVID lasts. The studies that have been done in South Africa show that patients who have had COVID present with good antibodies afterwards. And that's great news for us, because the hope is that with a little mutation in the virus, which is what we've seen, and good antibodies, we hope that people who have had COVID will be immune going forward. But at this point, we do not have a long enough data or longitudinal course of this virus to say that anybody who's had COVID is immune. And we certainly have not had any longitudinal experience to be able to give a recommendation that someone who's had COVID is safe from getting it again and can go out without a mask or not protect themselves. And therefore, at this point, we have to say that if you've had COVID, you are as at risk of getting COVID again as anybody else. And we say we hope that you'll be immune, but at the moment we take it as if it would be influenza and you could be reinfected.
Thanks, Dr. Israel. That makes a lot of sense. We want to thank a loyal sponsor, Mantis Security. If you've watched some of these 35 webinars, then you've seen them and you've heard from them. Mark Kramer and the team, thank you so much for your loyal and generous sponsorship of these webinars. And we're going to watch a short video from Mantis telling us a little bit more about what they've been doing. Thanks, Howard. And once again, a big thank you to Mantis Security. We are now going to hear from Dr. Lana Marcus. So I'm going to ask you to start your video. And Dr. Lana, welcome to the panel. And yeah, we're looking forward to hearing what you've been through.
Thank you very much. So had you asked me in the weeks preceding our infection, do you feel that you're at risk for COVID? I would have emphatically said no. I'm one of those isolate, social distancing proponents. I was campaigning for schools to close and schools to close. So we haven't had play dates, we haven't had social interactions. And then in my line of work, I'm very protected. I've got all the PPE and the visors and the masks and the aprons, and I always felt very secure in my office. I knew I was doing the right things. There's alcohol here, there are wipes there, there's a lot of washing and scrubbing, and I felt safe in my office. I felt safe sending my children back to school because I believe that the school has done everything they can to protect the children. And you know, you hear that as long as you're wearing your fabric masks out in public and you're 1.5 meters from another person and you're not in confined spaces, that you should be okay. And to the best of my knowledge, all the members of my household were doing exactly that. So on the Wednesday before I started feeling unwell, when my hubby became very snotty, I thought really nothing of it. I thought he had man flu. I gave him a cortisone nose spray. I told him to suck it up and get on with it. And also, you know, from the best of our knowledge, congestion is not meant to be a predominant feature of COVID. You know, they talk about the body aches and the headaches and the fevers and the dry cough and the sore throat. And they say that, you know, your basic runny nose and sneezing should not be a feature of COVID. So when hubby wasn't feeling 100% on the Wednesday, I thought nothing of it, and we continued. And then on the Thursday night, I went to bed feeling a little stuffy, and I woke up at 3 in the morning with such intense sinus congestion that I actually couldn't fall asleep for the rest of the night. I think I might have passed out at about 5:30. And then spent the rest of the morning feeling really cold. And I thought to myself, well, I checked my temperature every 20 minutes. Why do I feel so cold? Why do I feel like I just can't get warm? And my temperature was absolutely normal. So I thought, well, you had a bad night, you didn't sleep. Your body just is fatigued. You'll have a good nap and you'll feel fine. My children were at school that day. I booked off all my patients, decided to just take it easy, lay on my bed, fetch them from school. And then around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I was thinking to myself, this is ridiculous. Took my temperature again, and suddenly I had a temperature of 38. And this didn't seem right. I thought to myself, look, I know I've got sore sinuses, but I shouldn't be getting a temperature of 38 with a sinusitis. And at that point in time, I messaged a friend of mine and I said, oh my God, I don't know what to do. A doctor friend of mine. And I said, I'm not quite sure what to do because could it be my sinuses? I think I must do a COVID test. So on the Saturday morning, I hauled myself off to Empath and they did the swab. And the whole weekend, I was fairly convinced that it could not possibly be COVID because there's no way we've been exposed to it. And also, I did have this very prominent sinusitis that was bothering me. So I was discussing with various medical colleagues, and we all kind of thought, well, let's just see what the result looks like. In the interim, I noticed that my eyeballs were really achy, like when you've had a bad case of flu and it hurts to move your eyes around. And I felt a little bit off, but nothing specific. So when my SMS popped through on Sunday evening, urgent results, patient Lana Malach, COVID positive. It's just like everything went crazy, just totally crazy. I looked at my husband, I said, oh my God, we've got COVID. And at that point in time, it was grossly apparent that if I had COVID, then he clearly had COVID, seeing as he had symptoms first. My kids realized that, oh wait, no one's putting us to bed. Something weird is going on here. The little one became very subdued because he realized that mommy must have tested positive for COVID, and they keep hearing that people with COVID get really sick. So I had an almost inconsolable 7-year-old, and here I am with a virus that I'm not sure he has, and I don't know how to console him. My big one thought that it was quite amusing, and then we decided, because my little one had had a sore throat and my husband had had symptoms, that we should go and have them all tested on the Monday morning, which we did. What I found very interesting about my whole COVID experience from this point onwards is that there was absolutely nothing consistent, barring the fact that this nasal congestion with the postnasal drip and the full sinuses lasted the entire duration of the illness and beyond. The symptoms are so non-specific, and they come and they go. Husband and I both developed that lack of smell, anosmia, and an altered sensation of taste. My one son got a temperature. No one else in my family had a temperature. So this whole idea of screening everyone for temperature is not particularly helpful, in my opinion. Obviously, if you do have a temperature, it's a big red flag. But migratory aches and pains, I'd be sitting there and all of a sudden get a sharp pain in my chest, and then think, oh God, that's too terrible. And then 20 minutes later, it was gone. Then there'd be a sharp pain in my back. For a couple of days, I had really achy shins. If I pressed on my shin bones, they were really sore. My hubby had experienced, he's the warm one in the family. Normally I climb into bed and I warm myself up on him. He was the one with these icy cold hands and feet. That really bothered him a lot. There was definitely an element of fatigue. I obviously told my domestic worker that she needed to not be in contact with us because she seemed okay. So she quarantined on her own for 2 weeks, and I was there for doing all the housework at the same time. There was no rest. And I remember one day I decided, this floor looks too terrible, I'm going to sweep the floor. And it was such a minor exercise, and I could actually feel my heart pounding. It was exhausting. And I actually had to go and sit down for like 2 hours to regroup. Hanging the washing, you know, I had to do the linen. I had to call my husband to help me hang the washing. I could not physically lift my arms above my head. So it was, it takes a whole lot out of your body. The dry cough was kind of, it came, it went. It wasn't huge, but interestingly enough, I frequently got a sensation of like a tightness in my chest. And this is the problem with being a medical professional, because you've got subjective evidence and you've got objective evidence. And subjectively, I could have told you, oh my word, it's gone to my chest. I feel like I can't breathe. And then part of me said, Lauren, there's a way to check for this. And I'd put a pulse oximeter on my finger and my SATs would be fine. And I was sitting with SATs of 96, 97%. So I said to myself, stop freaking out. It is not in your lungs. Your oxygen saturation is fine, and carry on. So it's very hard to find a balance between the emotion and the logic, especially when you have a lot of background information into the condition. The exhaustion was pervasive, and I knew that we'd turned the corner when one morning I woke up before my alarm clock. The fact that I didn't have to drag myself out of bed said, okay, we've turned the corner, things are getting better. The community was amazing. I was very upfront from the get-go about having tested positive. There were messages, there were phone calls, everybody's very concerned. People were just dropping food. We're going to the shops, what can we get you? How can we help you? The support was amazing and very, very much appreciated. And we are very, very blessed to have the friends and family and community that we do.
Thank you, Lana. I mean, what you've described again is, it sounds like it just really shocked you unbelievably when you received that diagnosis or that positive test. And I think you've just helped a lot of people dispel the whole thing of needing to know where you got it from, being so careful and us understanding, you know, the measures that you took in order to make sure you guys, you know, were as safe as possible. And then out of nowhere, this came. And you also touched on a very interesting thing that a lot of families are concerned about, which is the anxiety of our children. And of course, that can be a whole webinar in itself, right? But I think that's quite an interesting thing. I'd like to ask, you know, how did you manage your children's anxiety on that? Because I think we could all learn from it.
I think you have to look at each family as an individual unit, because it's not a one size fits all. Effectively, I've got a 7-year-old and a 10-year-old, and they're little and they are sensitive. And I know, and I suspected that the one had it already before we did any testing. He'd had the sore throat. And the older one seemed absolutely fine. Funny enough, his test was positive. The little one's was negative. I suspect a false negative. And the older one tested positive on the Monday, but only developed a temperature and a headache on the Wednesday, fortunately short-lived. But before we actually knew their status, I decided that my children's mental well-being is not necessarily more important, but in this instance had to be taken into account more so than their physical. And we all know that, thank God, children are not as affected by COVID as adults. They tend to run a milder course. And my little one is asthmatic, but he's a very well-controlled asthmatic. And I thought to myself, he will suffer more from a lack of love and attention and feeling like he's in danger than if I actually isolate from him.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks for sharing. Dan?
I think that Lana brings up a very good point there about false negatives, which I see is coming through on the Q&A a bit. So maybe we should just quickly talk about that. And that's, we know that the sensitivity of the PCR testing is only up to 75%. There's about 25 to 30% of tests that actually can come back negative when the patient still has COVID. So if a patient has really significant COVID symptoms and the swab is still negative, we still suggest isolating and waiting. And then I have had patients in my own practice where we've had to I had a guy last week who had a positive and a negative swab within a day of each other. So that is something to bear in mind. Another thing that we've been asked a bit is about, people may have heard about Prof. Karim talking about the change in quarantine and isolation times that it was on the media. At the moment, we know that we isolate and quarantine for 14 days. And there've been a few questions about it's being moved to 8 days and 5 days. And I did get some clarity on this afternoon, and it will be clarified further by the Department of Health in the next few days. But basically, the gist of it is like this. The quarantine times changing is primarily for healthcare workers. Healthcare work, we're in a situation in this country where doctors and nurses are depleted hugely. And we found on this has been found on the studies that after a week, the viral shedding is very, very low, if anything at all. So wearing proper PPE, a healthcare worker should not be putting anybody at risk. So the new guidelines may change that a healthcare worker can wear PPE and be back in the field, so to speak, after a week. And they are looking at reducing the amount of time for quarantining and isolating. But at this point, it still sits at 14 days, and that will be clarified by the Department of Health in the next couple of days. For now, no changes.
Daniel, can you address the question that's come in from the audience? Once you've been tested positive, when can you go back into the world? Is there a time limit, or do you have to have tested negative again?
So I think that Lana and I often get this question from our patients, and this is there's a huge misnomer that you need to do a test at the end of your illness to check that you have now become negative. That is not the case. So the way it works is like this. You test positive, you see out the days, and you don't need to check again. If you do check again, there's a good chance your test will still be positive, because the testing we're doing is called PCR testing. And it's a molecular medicine testing that's exquisitely sensitive and picks up little fragments of viral RNA. So up to 6, 7, 8 weeks after the infection, that test can still be positive, which will give you the wrong idea that you still have COVID, even though you're better. So we don't check again. We wait 14 days at the moment, the way the guidelines are, and we take it from there.
Dan, just to tell people, the power's gone out in my area. I presume it's gone out in your area as well. I'm not quite sure yet. I saw about 250 logins drop literally in 1 minute as the power has gone out. But I'm sure those people who have generators at home or UPSs, or if you haven't, turn them on now, because certainly Melrose area has gone into darkness and I'm on UPS now. Dan, I don't know about you.
No, my lights are on, so I'm just going to roll with it. Dr. Lana, thank you so much for sharing your story and your insights, your perspective. Daniel, I want to touch on for a moment, because last week I was actually reading another fantastic copy of the Jewish Report, and I read about your mentorship program, and I thought that actually gave it, like, in a way, it gave me the inspiration to have a panel like this where there's sharing and support and collaboration and teamwork. So maybe you can tell us a little bit more about the program.
Thanks, Dan. So the program was really just a natural evolution. I found that at the beginning, my first patients with COVID were patients who returned from overseas, and they had symptoms, and obviously we treated them. And then when we started getting a bit of community spread, and we had very anxious patients who had now picked up COVID, I had a couple of patients who really had nowhere to turn to. And Peter might touch on this later, that the isolation in this process is really one of the hardest things. How you can spend 14 days on your own and really feel, stay at home, you can't see your doctor, you can't see your family, get better. And with the symptoms and the fear of what was going to happen to them, there was, I thought of the best, well, how could we best support them? And I found that a wonderful way to support them was to connect them on Zoom or WhatsApp video with another patient who was in a similar patient kind of group as them, demographic wise, or who had recovered already from COVID. And a few of those calls, and then putting them in touch with each other, set up like a buddy system, a mentor program that gave them support. And the positivity we got back from both the patient who was currently affected and the previous patient was wonderful. The program's carried on. I mean, it's not an official program, but we've had now the original guys are now mentors to the people who are getting the infection now. And we really have encouraged, and I encourage the doctors in our community as really can be the glue for this, and also just people in the community to hook up and to have a mentor and a patient who can speak to each other first on video and then together on WhatsApp privately, just to lead each other through this. So a few things. I mean, we've made a Google form that I see Dan has posted in the chat, and that Google form gives you if you're someone on this webinar tonight, or even you know someone who currently has COVID, who's alone, and you really feel just emotionally could do with some more support, or you're a patient who's had COVID and you're better and you want to go out there and help and you're not quite sure how to do so, please click on that link that Dan's posted, and maybe the Jewish Report will share that link in future as well. And we will get together a team of people who will pair you up. It's not a big time commitment, but it's a huge, huge help. Just having someone who can say, doesn't matter what my doctor tells me, but this is what I felt, and how did you feel, and how did you get through this emotional hurdle, and the social side of it as well.
I think it's such an important thing that you're providing there, Dan, because the isolation is crippling for a lot of people. It's absolutely crippling. We go into our own heads. The anxiety takes over. We can even manifest symptoms. That tightening of the chest that Dr. Marcus expressed. When you don't have that little machine. I'm sorry, I haven't got the right terminology. But when you haven't got that, what's that pulse oximeter? Oh, what, Dan? What is it called? That thing. When you haven't got it, your own anxiety, you're making it all up as you go. So it is very, very, very frightening. And to have that connection and that ability to reach out to someone who's walked that road, I think it's priceless. I think it's an amazing thing you're doing.
Kol hakavod, Dr. Israel. Okay, now we're going to ask Michael Salomon to unmute himself and turn on his camera. We saw him briefly a moment ago. I think he's in the dark in his man cave. It really looks like a cave.
No, it's not just, this is a proper cave. So the load shedding just started. I thought that for a second there, we were going to actually have some respite because it got to 2 minutes past. And I thought maybe the president was going to delay the load shedding, but no such luck. So yeah, sitting here in the cave, I hope it's not too scary.
Yeah, so Mike, welcome to the panel. Share with us, what have you gone through? I saw your picture on Facebook last week. I think it was exactly a week ago, when you felt like you had gotten through it. But you also mentioned it's not to be taken lightly. So maybe share with us, what did you go through?
So I also just wanted to start off by thanking everyone involved. Everyone from my family and friends to Dr. Setzer, and especially Robin from Hatzola. I think that the support that we've got in this community is just beyond description, and I'm truly, truly grateful for it. I'm sitting here, I'm quite cautious in the way that I'm addressing, because when I listen to the people who've already spoken, and I mean, their stories are amazing, and I can see that there was a lot of challenge getting through this thing. From my perspective, as I say, I'm cautious about it, because for me, I sort of got through it without any real fear. In fact, what happened was on the Monday, I felt a little bit achy, almost like I was going to get sick. And I don't know why. Under normal circumstances, actually, I wouldn't have actually even thought much of it. So I went to get tested. There was a little bit of a backlog. So I remember it. I was about to play a card game with some shenanigans on the Thursday night. And my wife came to me and said, Setzer just called and actually you're positive. Now, the weird thing was that, I was supposed to play tennis on the Sunday and I was genuinely feeling fine. I'd had a couple of nights of night sweats and had a bit of a headache and things like that, but nothing that was really bothering me. And the interesting thing for me was that the second that I got told that I had COVID, all of a sudden I started thinking, well, maybe this little ache is something, and maybe this is something, and maybe this is something. And it actually became quite a scary thing that, maybe it's going to get worse. And then also just looking at the way that immediately people reacted to it, you can understand that even though I don't think it's intentional and I don't think it's done with any malice, but there is definitely a stigma about this thing. And people are looking at others who've got it, like they've got, and it's, as I say, I don't think it's out of malice, but they're scared they're going to get it. So even though I've now come out of the the thing completely. In my second week, I had probably my most noticeable symptom in that I lost my taste. My beers didn't taste so good after a few days. But the thing about it is that as I came out, and I've been feeling perfect. I mean, I went yesterday, I ran 10 kilometers. I've been genuinely fine. But the thing about it is that the second someone knows that you've had it, you can see a bit of apprehension. As I say, for me, I'm not worried about my own personal feelings, but you can just sense that there is so much nervousness around this thing in the community. And I think that if you go and look at all the other symptoms of this pandemic, which are obviously the economic things and being locked up at home and stuff like that, when you start adding that element of fear into it, it does become quite a scary thing.
Mike, thank you so much. I think you're touching on such an important thing here, and that's this again, this issue about stigma. Stigma is driven by fear, and I think that, as in we've seen in so many diseases, when people are afraid of something, they run away from it, and they almost treat the people who have it as if they're the other, and they separate themselves from it. And the biggest challenge that we have at this time, and you can look at this from a spiritual perspective, you can look at it from an emotional or social perspective, is that COVID really is about breaking down the barriers between people. I so believe that if you look at this just from a step back, we're in a situation where we can't be with other people. When you had your illness, you couldn't be with other people. And yet the most important thing for a patient like you is that you were able to still reach out to other people. One of your friends actually contacted me and asked me if I thought you'd be okay, and he wanted to know how, one of my patients is friendly with you, and he wanted to know how he could help you. And the point is that just shows how important it is at this time that people are able to reach out to each other, and you've expressed that in your in terms of the community. I think it's like so important for us to realize that I've always said that social distancing is a flawed term. We're not trying to be socially distant. We're trying to be physically distant, but socially connected. And that's what you touched on there. Well done. And thank you so much for sharing that story.
Thanks. I just want to know, in terms of socially distant, none of us want to cause harm to anyone. And, in my household, because I genuinely didn't think I had it, I didn't distance from my family. I mean, my wife is a asthmatic, controlled, but my daughter is a type 1 diabetic, I think, as you are. And, the second that we found out that I was positive, I mean, it was almost 5 days into it. And there was fear internally about that everyone else in the household was going to get it, and no one in our household did get it except for me, which was it's one of those things also which we can't reconcile.
So, and I think that speaks largely to how you guys behaved, and just it's something to take for our participants to think about, is that if one patient in the family gets COVID, and particularly if the other people in the family have got comorbidities, the question is, that everybody's faces, do you isolate on your own? And Dr. Marcus was talking about this. And the real answer, the right answer to that is yes, you should isolate on your own. So you really should have separated. One should separate oneself from one's family to a degree. So we can be very grateful the fact that the people in your family didn't get it, and that you guys have managed to get to this point. But if you're out of the days, you're out of the days, and we must break down the stigma, tell your story, and say you're safe to go back into the community.
Thanks.
Okay, great stuff. Thank you, Mark. Howie, we have another very generous sponsor this evening, isn't that right?
Absolutely, Dan, and in fact, Capability BPO has been sponsoring so many of the webinars that we've done really right since the beginning. Capability BPO offers a diverse set. Ooh, you've just taken my screen away, Dan. Sorry. Capability.
I'm sharing. Are you sharing?
No, you sharing. Capability BPO offers a diverse set of BPO services to private and public sector clients, both domestically and in the international markets. Detin, which is part of the Capability BPO group, is a professional financial services business that specializes in debt recovery and credit control solutions to both public and private institutions, operating its own specialist debt collection contact centers and creating unique strategies for its clients in order to significantly improve their collection results. So if you want to contact either Capability BPO or alternatively Detin, why don't you contact Mark Essie? Mark Essie is the CEO of both, and he'll be able to assist you with solutions which are tailor-made for your specific business requirements, bringing the expertise of his entire team to your back office. So a huge thank you to Capability BPO and Detin, who have been so active in sponsoring so many of these webinars. And if you do need the services of any BPO services or Detin, please feel free to contact Mark Essie on the contact details that you should see on your screen right now. Thanks, Dan. Over back to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Howie. So I've posted the details in the chat, and that's where you can get hold of Mark Essie and the team at Capability BPO, and a massive thank you to the team. Next up, we are going to ask Tanya Demby to turn on her camera and unmute herself. Tanya is also sitting in the dark, so welcome, Tanya.
I'm so sorry.
You're so sorry?
Well, you know, I had beautiful lighting and now it's just not my best.
No, you're still looking great, Tanya. So why don't you share with us what you've been through over the last couple of weeks?
Okay, so sure. I'll kind of backtrack a little bit. I think over lockdown, you know, I was experiencing quite a bit of depression, which is something that I deal with on a day-to-day basis, but it had kind of spiked, and due to, you know, a couple of reasons, I wasn't doing amazingly well. Then, unfortunately, an improv friend of mine, he actually passed away, and it was to suicide. And that really took me into quite a low space. 5 days later, I start coughing, and immediately I'm like, this doesn't feel right. And I actually said to my mom that evening, we were playing cards together, and I said, you know, I've been coughing the whole day. I might need to, you know, isolate. And that's what I did. The next day, Thursday, I just thought, you know, let me rather be safe than sorry. So my symptoms kind of started with this dry cough. It was this dull headache that sat like behind my eyes, and that was constant. It kind of felt like I was getting a throat infection. But then by Saturday, when I had lost my sense of smell, then I was pretty sure that it was COVID, even though my parents were like, no, it's not COVID, don't be silly. So I was kind of medicating, taking an antibiotic for a throat infection, and it just kind of wasn't getting better. And then the energy, just the complete lack of energy was, it was debilitating. I think as Lana mentioned, hanging up washing was like, it felt like I had done an Ironman. It was incredibly hard. So Sunday, I went for the test to Empath, and then by Tuesday, I got the results. But I guess in my heart, I knew that I had COVID already. So with the results coming back and saying you're positive, sent me into another kind of spiral of depression. And that was incredibly hard. I was isolating by myself in my apartment. So, you know, I have these, you know, a lot of those 2 weeks, they like a blur. I can't remember a lot of it, a lot of details, but I know there were moments where I was just sitting and crying. And I guess maybe just one thing that really scared me was the thought that I would never be able to smell again. So I remember running to the kitchen and smelling curry and garlic and onions, and it was just this dull sensation. I think as soon as I tested and I got the positive results, then Hatsola, they kind of came in, and once a day, Tali called me, and it was a really calming thing to know that it wasn't just, you know, my family or a friend. It was someone who like was really checking in and checking on my vitals every single day. And that was a huge relief, just knowing that there was something bigger, someone looking after me. I remember at some point, and I don't even think I told you this, Dr. Dan, but I got lots of bruises on my body, and I was like, where are these bruises coming from? And probably day 9 and 10 were my worst. And that was with fever and extreme body pain, which I wasn't sure if that was just my fibromyalgia. And maybe that accelerated the pain for me in my body. So yeah, and then I think by Saturday, I actually remember opening like the doors and going, wow, I don't have a headache. I'm feeling quite good and quite happy, and I've got a bit of energy. So now I've been on this trajectory where each day incrementally I am getting more energy and I can do things. Today I managed to really clean my apartment, and mopping was exhausting. I actually had to do it over 2 days, but I'm getting there. And I actually had even a bit of energy to make some soup, and I attempted to make some fudge. So I'm really like, this really is a wave that you kind of have to ride out. And I must just say, my mom tested positive as well at the same time. And with that came feelings of guilt that perhaps I'd infected her. And, you know, maybe she infected me. We don't know. Her symptoms were very different to mine. I didn't really experience any stomach or gastro problems, whereas she did. Mine was kind of more like up in my throat and sinus. But now I guess I'm dealing with feelings of shame. And am I this social pariah? And how do I almost integrate back into society? So it's a trauma. It really is quite a traumatic thing to happen, especially being alone. And, you know, we all kind of want what's on the other side of, you know, someone's fence. I would have loved to have had family around me. And I guess some people just want to be completely alone. But so I was doing it alone, and that was hard, making sure I was feeding myself, you know, and taking the correct medication, because it is a bit of a blur and your mind is, you know, in some strange place. You're not present. But I thank God, you know, for all the help and medical support and friends around me, you know, who would just check in on a daily basis. Tan, how you doing? Okay, great. And, you know, I can also say thank you for all the food delivered and those simple basic things, because they're really sometimes I had the most I could do was warm a bowl of soup. That was it. Now I'm making soup for other people. So, you know, there is hope, and yeah, I guess I'm scared. There's huge fears going back into the community, you know, just back into society, and, you know, how do I move forward and, you know, not be seen as like, there's Tanya, oh my God, you know, it's a scary thing, but you know, it is about like also owning it and accepting, and I can't change it, and it's just about being kind to myself. And, you know, maybe when all of this gets better, you know, then I can donate plasma. You know, there are so many, like, I think positive things that we can also take from this, and educating the community, you know, that there is a silver lining.
Tanya, thank you so much for being so vulnerable in telling your story, okay? Because I think a lot of us sit and experience those emotions of shame and guilt and depression that you've highlighted. You know, shame is such an interesting emotion. Again, Brené Brown is the guru of researching shame. And she speaks to it in saying, shame actually speaks to the perfectionist within us, right? When we don't feel like we're operating at our best, and then we feel shameful around that. And you also describe this wave. You so eloquently put it there. It's that wave of the ups and the downs, and how the downs are really, really, really low. But what is so fascinating is that you keep coming back to the support that you have received, and how people really do care. And I do want to just encourage you to step out again, because people want to learn from you. And I think that's also what this is about. This whole talk tonight is about saying, guys, as a community, we're actually doing amazingly well in caring, in loving, in showing real compassion and empathy. That is phenomenal. We must now remove that stigma and that shame and continue supporting and rising up, because that inner perfectionist stuff, I'm not sure it's even valid for now. You've just overcome an enormous deal, and it is a trauma. You're 100% right. But thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing everything that you have tonight. We can all learn from you.
Thank you. And just
Tanya,
maybe, sorry, Dan, maybe just the last thing is to say, you know, doing something like this in itself is cathartic and helps me heal, you know? So I do think there's always value in talking, and rather than keeping it internal. So thank you for giving me the space to do that.
Amazing. Thank
Tanya,
you.
you've been a real inspiration. And I mean, the thing is that to see you, certainly from me, I can see you on the other side of the spectrum now. It must have been a week or 10 days ago. You were you were being mentored, and I can see you in the space of being a mentor already. So well done, and you're an example for people to see how you can get through this both emotionally and physically, and really, really help people afterwards. And I look forward to your amazing work coming up.
Thank you.
These guys.
Yeah, and just briefly from my side, Tanya, thank you, and sure, so brave and courageous coming onto the panel. You know, when I called you, you said straight away, and it's really inspiring that you want to use your story and your challenges to inspire and help others. So, yeah, just really well done. Kola kavod to you. And we are looking for Jason Joffe. Daniel, I know Jason has been one of your mentees, I think, on the program, the mentorship program. We are looking for him. I think he might have lost signal because of load shedding. I'm waiting to hear from him on WhatsApp as well. It looks like we've actually lost Howie here as well. I think Howie's trying to get back on. So Jason is our fifth and final patient who is going to be sharing his story with us. I think, Daniel, maybe in the meantime, while we wait to hear from Jason, maybe you can share either if you want to take some questions. I know that you've been looking at the Q&A, and I know that you wanted to answer some of those live, or if you alternatively want to share anything about Jason's story and you know, how the mentorship program has helped him or worked for him. So I'll leave it to you.
Okay, so I think that let's just see if Jason reconnects. His story is very inspiring, but we have touched on a lot of these issues already. So I'm thinking that, Dan, maybe we can run through a bit of the Q&A, just in terms, I see there's quite a bit of medical Q&A. I'm just looking at so I haven't had a chance to field the questions because I haven't been hosting it, but let me just quickly look. Can I make a off-the-cuff suggestion that maybe we can ask Dr. Marcus also to unmute her video while we're waiting for Jason, and we can just go with the doctors and just quickly run through some of the pertinent Q&A. So I'll look through it and she can give a couple of the answers, and so will I if she wants to. So I see that someone asked at almost 7:20. What are the please comment on the advantages of vitamin D3 as treatment and prophylaxis for COVID. Lana, do you want to take that?
So I think one must take into account that we are actually living through a minor pandemic of vitamin D deficiency as well. Vitamin D is very closely linked with the immune system. We found that in asthmatics who are vitamin D deficient, they have more frequent exacerbations than in those who are sufficient. It's ironic because we're living in Africa and we have beautiful sunshine. And I could safely say that about 50% of my patients who I check vitamin D levels in have insufficiency or deficiency. I think it boils down to a lot of this indoor lifestyle that we've adopted, and also we're using sunscreen, and that's a fabulous thing because we obviously want to avoid skin cancers, but sunscreen actually inhibits the chemical process that converts the chemical process for the conversion of vitamin D. So there is a large degree of vitamin D deficiency in our community, well, throughout South Africa, and we're looking more so at the being vitamin D sufficient. As far as I understand, vitamin D is the only supplement that we actually have some evidence for. The rest there's conjecture that some of the other vitamin supplements may help. There is definitely logic behind all of them.
Okay, great. I'll just run through a few of these quickly at around 7:30. Someone asked, they said that doctors say that it does not affect pregnancy. What evidence whether it does or doesn't getting COVID affect the development of the fetus? The evidence at the moment just shows that it can cause early labor in the 3rd trimester only, but we watch pregnant patients carefully, and I certainly wouldn't go into a state of anxiety if you are pregnant, but I would certainly treat that as a responsibility to isolate yourself carefully as you get on with the pregnancy. Next question is hydroxychloroquine and chloroquine as a whole. There is no evidence at the moment that has helped in any of the studies. There has been a lot of information in the literature about corticosteroids. And people asking about whether things like dexamethasone and steroids should be used. And the short answer to that is, in the viremic phase, which I spoke about initially, there is no place for corticosteroids. Steroids actually impair your body's ability to fight infection. So to take that at the beginning really just can prolong the infection. But certainly in a pneumonic phase, there is a place for steroids, but that would be a patient on oxygen and probably in hospital. So no steroids at home unless you're taking steroids for some chronic condition. And another one I'll answer before I pose one to Lana is someone asked about if you have a single bathroom at home, what do you do if you say you're positive and your family isn't, or you don't think they are, and you only have one bathroom? So you've really got to be vigilant, and you've got to sterilize the bathroom after use with a Jik solution, and Jik does kill COVID. Let's ask. Yeah, please.
What they say is that a certain amount of viral matter does get passed in the stool, and there's postulation that when one flushes the toilet, some of that viral material is actually aerosolized. So it's also very important to avoid going into a bathroom for a time period after someone has flushed the toilet.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Okay, so let's ask. So Seymour Talbot asked, I'll let Alana answer. Is steaming good to keep your airways? I think he needs airways clear and open.
So I've seen that in the GP guidance that we are distributing to our patients, that we are advising it. And I can say from personal experience that it definitely did seem to help. I don't know if it was because there was a lot of congestion, but there's definitely no contraindication to steaming.
Okay, yeah, I've heard the same thing. Someone asked at almost 10 to 8, has Gauteng reached its peak yet? No, it has not reached its peak yet. The epidemiologists out there are saying that Cape Town looks like it's reached, the Cape has looked like it's reached its peak, Western Cape. Gauteng, we're looking at a peak still in the next 1 to 2 months. So we are, the hospitals are busy, but we are still looking at the peak. Just to interject or to give it a little bit of space here, Peter, is there anything you want to speak about now while we're waiting for Jason to connect?
I'm actually just also scanning through some of these Q&A and also just some of the comments on the chat. I see someone posted, you know, one of the scariest parts was their husband was in hospital and they weren't allowed to be there with them, and it was very, very lonely and scary. And I think it just, you know, there are a lot of people that are suffering with this loneliness and the fear. And I think that to reach out to these programs like yours, Dan, the mentorship program, and to the Hatsola program and the CSO medical program that they've got in Cape Town, I think these things are essential for our survival at the moment if you're in these situations, you know, when you're alone. So I hope that that's something you are taking from it. This person is anonymous. And everybody else who is suffering with that being alone aspect, I hope that tonight you've learned that there are support mechanisms and parts of the community that are able and willing, and please do reach out and let us help.
Great, thank you, Peter. Welcome back to Howard. I see Howie's in the dark there. Welcome back. Glad you're back online, and welcome to Jason. I know you guys have both been troubleshooting and trying to get yourself back. Such are the joys of lockdown. Jason, so welcome to the panel. We've chatted over the last few days, and you have said that you have been feeling, I think, better and better each day, but you've had quite an ordeal. So share your story with us.
Yeah, sorry about that delay. We just had the whole place electrically reticulated and the inverters didn't work, and then I was busy stressing about that. So my ordeal started, I would probably say, at the beginning of lockdown. And I say that for one reason, it's the anxiety that it caused. So over and over the months came the weeks, the extensions, etc. It became like the early 90s movie Groundhog Day. You didn't know whether it was the weekend, it was the night, and it was just going on and on and on and on. And I got into the cycle of absolute anxiety. So I call my neurologist, because I do suffer from epilepsy, and I say to her, I need something that can just calm me down in the night so I can get a good night's sleep, etc. So this is on the 26th, roughly, of June. So she prescribes a anti-anxiety medication, which I take, which is going to calm me down, which will let me be more focused during the day. The next day, I'm feeling absolutely exhausted, but beyond exhausted. It's like that jet lag exhausted, that you've crossed 12 time zones exhausted. I had no other symptoms at this point. And I thought, no, this must be a what do you call it? Not a byproduct, but a side effect of the medication that I was on. I then gave it the next day. The next day I woke up. I was fine in the morning. I was starting to get headaches and pain behind the eyes, but the sheer exhaustion was kicking in. I said, no, this is on the Wednesday. I said, Daniel, I made an appointment with him through his app. We did a face-to-face. I told him what my side effects were. By the time we got to the appointment, and the exhaustion, the pains in the body, the sweating, the headaches, and the shortness of breath. I mean, for me to move from, I was working at the office at this point in time just to break my days between weekends, days and nights, as I said earlier. I moved from, I said to Daniel, said to me, no, go get a COVID test. Let's treat this as COVID positive at this point in time. So I went to Rosebank, to Ampath over there. I didn't realize that it wasn't at the hospital itself. It was 4 buildings before. So I parked the car over there. I had to walk, now 4 buildings down. By the time I got there, there must have been a queue of 20 people in front of me, a sheer line. I couldn't breathe. It felt like there was a vice on my chest at this point in time. The nurse, who was all in PPE, pushed me to the front, filled out the forms for me, then said, call your wife, get your wife to come and pick you up from the hospital, because there's no way you're going to be able to walk back. My phone unfortunately went dead. Now I thought, oh my gosh, how am I going to get to the car? So they sent a little buggy for me, and they took me to the car, and I got home. Already on the Friday morning, night, there were night sweats, the pain touched your skin, it was sensitive. I couldn't breathe. Thursday morning, Hatsola already at 7 o'clock, they already had a nurse over here with the oximeter and the thermometer to monitor me. Then came the Friday, symptoms even got worse. I felt like I couldn't go to, even the mere task of going to the bathroom it used to stress me out. And I've got a lot of comorbidities as well. I'm diabetic, I'm epileptic, I've got high blood pressure, high cholesterol, gout, reflux, you know it. I'm on medication for all of that, all well controlled, etc. I only got the results on the Sunday at that point in time. After that, due to all the comorbidities, Hatsola called me, I think it was 3 times a day, and they sent nurses 3 times to just take my blood pressure, to do all of that. So I would say all in all, the side effects of COVID lasted 10 days, but it was 10 days of excruciating, absolute hell. I don't know how else to say it. The breathing, the headaches, my lips were so dry that they were bleeding. Yeah, then I only started feeling better about five days ago, and then I exited my situation 2 days ago. But I can only Daniel also then put me in touch with another COVID positive patient who got through his ordeal, and we would WhatsApp each other throughout the process, because the anxiety in itself, knowing not what symptom is coming next, it really helped me through the process as well. And I think going to Google it, and you know, that's just going to make you completely crazy. The other thing is the thoughts that rush through your mind. It's like cars going in different directions on the highway. You lose complete focus. Everyone says you sit there and you can watch Netflix. For me, it was definitely not like that. Each day, it just felt very, very fast. You were sleeping most of the time, or you were in absolute pain, lower back pain particularly. So yeah, that was pretty much my ordeal. Also calling work to tell them, and then they're going to overdrive, and they have to work out who have you been in contact with, etc. And so you've got that psychological guilt of, you've given it to somebody, have they given it to somebody, have they given it to someone who's older, all of that. So yeah, that's pretty much my story. But my wife was there for me, my family was also there for me, so that was great. They all tested negative, which I don't understand. But yeah, and I think there's also a lot of anxiety in society now. You go out, I mean, I went for a haircut yesterday, a strange experience. You go to one place and they say, no, it's 20, you know, we want to go 21 days past the 14 days, I go to the next place, 10 days. So there's just a lot of confusion and anxiety in society. Yeah.
Thank you, Jace. You're looking great.
Thanks,
you really are. I think the last time I spoke to you on video, you didn't look this good. Thank you for sharing your story. The one thing that really rang out to me very strongly with you is I saw after you were diagnosed that you put up a social media post, and I saw on Facebook that you put a post where you wrote a public post saying that if there's anyone I've come into contact with in the last few days, I've been diagnosed with COVID, you know, please go isolate yourself or get yourself tested if you need to. I was really so impressed by that, because it takes courage. It takes, you know, that's breaking the stigma. What motivated you to do that? And,
my wife.
and you know, that really is, that's what we need. We need people to stand forward and say, I'm COVID positive and I'm proud.
Correct.
What made you do that?
100% that. There shouldn't be a stigma. There's no dirtiness or anything associated with this. I don't know where I got this. I don't know where I picked this up. I mean, it could have been at a Woolworths, a Pick n Pay, a police station. I did go and get stuff authenticated a couple of days before. I don't know where I picked it up. I had protection on. You can't stigmatize this disease as people have tried to stigmatize diseases like in the 1980s, or you know, TB or anything like that. It's not. Diseases should not be like that. And you know, for most of us that are watching here tonight, who are in a higher LSM, we lucky. But people that are not, that are living on top of each other, it must be much worse for them. There's a lot of superstition around these kinds of things. I really feel that for them.
But it's an example you set, because at the end of the day, I mean, I had a few people from your work environment phone me up and say, do you think I was in touch with Jason because I said hello on the other side of the building? And
Correct.
it's just that you're an example to people to stand forward and tell people when you become positive, because it helps us to contain this virus compared to staying at home and being quiet.
Yeah.
I think you're highlighting the social responsibility, you know, Jason. So thank you for allowing for posting it on your Facebook so people are aware and they do know. And I think, you know, we do need to reiterate, you know, that it's really important that we do keep physically distant, Dan, as you've so brilliantly highlighted, but make sure that we are socially connected and supportive of each other.
Yeah, and I must say, Hatsola was also amazing. Daniel was amazing. The programs that you put together, thank you very, very much. And I can just tell you, it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. And we are all going to, it's also that anxiety, you know, it's a big thing that. So Peter, you can also be kept very, very busy for the next couple of months.
The anxiety is real, yeah. Sorry,
Daniel,
Howie.
you said how good Jason was looking, and he's looking much better than before he had COVID, I must say.
Well, I lost 7 kilograms, Howard. So if you want to go on a diet, go get COVID. No, I'm not.
But let's talk about some of those other manifestations. I've seen people with like welts and bumps and rashes. What are those other weird things that people are getting that may be signs of COVID?
So Howie, we've seen various dermatological expressions of COVID. I mean, the most common one that's always being queried at the moment is this chilblain story. There seems to be a preponderance of chilblains in Johannesburg at the moment, and I've had several patients, as I'm sure Dr. Marcus has as well, who come to our room saying, you know, what is this on my toes? Is it COVID toe? I think I have COVID. And I attended a webinar where we saw some dermatological manifestations of COVID. The guidelines, though, in terms of dermatology is if you just have an isolated dermatological issue, we don't generally go and send everyone with that for a COVID test. But remember, the treatment for these weird and wonderful things is isolation and watching at the beginning. And then if the patient is unwell or they have other secondary symptoms, for sure, and we can't work out what's wrong with them, and like a normal chilblain that isn't getting better, we would do a COVID test. I'm not really too hung up from a community perspective on looking at these specific dermatological, because if you start linking every little manifestation of COVID in the different body systems, you're going to create a neurosis in the community that every little symptom that comes out in any body system could be COVID. And I don't think that's a sensible approach. That said, COVID does go through the different systems in the body. So it's isolate, find your doctor and check.
Finding your rational thread, not allowing your anxiety thread. Find your people. That's the way.
Absolutely. I think we've lost Howie, have we?
Yeah, Howie's out
I think
again.
Howie's dropped off the call. He was looking and sounding quite ominous and scary there. I
know what Howie... Sorry, Dan, what Howie's really wanted us to mention on this call, and he WhatsApped me that just now, is the real place maybe where we went wrong as a community at the beginning of lockdown 3, where the government relaxed the laws, and I understand that the president has now made them a bit stricter again. I see someone's written on the chat, and I'm interested to hear what the changes are. And the idea was that, well, we thought, you know, as a community, we often feel as though we're above the problems, some of the problems in South Africa, and we can deal with them. So we felt, you know, we all safe, and we trust the people in our community, in our schools, in our shuls, so if they're being safe and we're being safe, we'll just, you know, be safe out there, but still be together on weekends, and that has led undeniably to a big spike in infections within our community. And if you look at Jewish communities around the world, there has been a disproportionately high number of infections in Jewish communities around the world, because Jewish people are social and like to spend time together, and it's a good thing, trusting one another's safety, and that's wonderful. But on a virology level and an infectious disease level, you've got to treat anyone you haven't been with, as in other words, not a spouse or someone you live with, as someone who could potentially be a danger. And we've learned a big lesson here about the absolute importance of not seeing even a brother or a sister or an elderly parent, or if that could put that person at risk, or if just to break down these bigger circles so that when there is spread, we don't get this situation of I've been in contact with the following 15 people and now they all have been at risk.
Excellent. Thank you, Daniel. So I know that you've been monitoring the Q&A, as has Howie, but Howie, he's lost his connection. So are there any other final Q&As that you want to address? Peter, the same goes for you. Any topics or themes that you feel came up that you need to just mention as closing words?
I think for me, I just want to reiterate about this shame and the stigma stuff. We are so powerful as a community. And I think that the minute we can start to get rid of that stigma and start to really support by touching base with what it means to be truly compassionate and truly empathetic, I think we could change a hell of a lot. And, listening to what your professionals are saying, reaching out, not being plugged into so many different resources about the forever changing bits of information. Find your professional that you trust in and stick to 1 or 2 media streams that are reliable and that are not linked to any fake news. And that can also help calm that anxiety. And let's just keep up the support, and just to say thank you to all of our doctors and all of Hatsola and everyone that is reaching out, all of our neighbors and friends and schools and communities for being so supportive. I think we really, really, really are blessed.
Thank you, Peter. And yeah, sure, the comments coming through in the chat, I think, really describing some of the appreciation for all of this information and this sharing. I think it's been so effective and so impactful. We were planning on doing a Q&A with all the panelists / patients coming back onto the panel towards the end, but we are running out of time, and we've actually addressed so many topics and themes and questions throughout. So I don't think that's necessary, but just to share a really nice message which came through from Iris in BC, Canada. I think that's British Columbia. Thanks for allowing me to participate. Here in BC, Canada, we have been quite successful in the management of COVID. However, we can learn a lot from the SA Jewish community in terms of transparency and the truly moving love and support to those impacted. Kol hakavod to all of you, and thanks so much to the panelists, wishing you and your families the best of health as we all get through this. And there's just been so many messages of love and care and support throughout this webinar, and especially now in the last couple of minutes. So thank you. If you do want to post any kind of information or support, please do so in the next half a minute or so, because we are going to be wrapping things up. I'm also kind of waiting to see if Howie rejoins, because I know he loves to say good evening, and I'm hearing someone.
Dan, if I could just share one thing, is that I feel like this pandemic is an opportunity. We can't view a pandemic as an opportunity. I mean, in many ways, it's a curse, but it is an opportunity for every person to reach into themselves and to reach out to the other. And that means reach into yourselves and see, now that you're almost forced to face yourself. During this pandemic, you can't run after the social patterns that we're used to all the time and things we hide behind. This is your opportunity for us to each just search into ourselves and to look at what are our areas that we need to work on and our areas of vulnerability and what makes us anxious and really it makes us deal with life. That's the internal searching. And externally, this is our opportunity to really reach out to other people. We can't physically be with them. And when in the past where we were able to sit on a Zoom meeting on a Sunday night for almost 2 hours with hundreds of people together, all sharing ideas and thinking together. I mean, we wouldn't even do that in a room together. So this is our opportunity to really, as a community, as we go, just really lend ourselves to other people, both physically, emotionally, socially, and just support people. And if we go through our 2 weeks of not being well, 1 week, 2 weeks of not being well, we'll get through that with the social support that we have from one another. And I'm very proud to be part of such a wonderful community of people who do this for one another. And well done to you, Dan, for putting together this panel, because this was your brainchild. And it's been a really, really big privilege for Peter and I both to be a part of it and to learn from you and the people on it.
Thank you,
Thank
Daniel.
you for the
Thank you.
opportunity, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's been an absolute privilege, and thank you to all of you who tuned in and who have stuck around right until the end. And thank you to those of you who chose us over the president. Hopefully you've got your executive summary of what the key takeaways from the president's address were. And yeah, just a massive thank you to all of our panelists / patients / survivors for sharing their really, really genuine, sincere, heartfelt messages and really words of inspiration. So thank you to each of you. Just to remind you that we have the webinar on investments coming up on Wednesday evening. We'll send out the link for the registration page for that webinar, probably sometime tomorrow. And then also we will be sending out the link to the recording of this particular webinar, but you may have realized by now that all the webinar recordings are actually available on one single YouTube page, which makes it really, really easy for you to watch each recording. You can even binge watch them if you like. They will take you a while because there are 35 of them. And this is actually one of the shorter ones. So you can look at youtube.com/Dan Stillerman, and all of the recordings sit there. So once again, a massive thank you to all of you. Have a great evening and a great week ahead. Take care, stay safe, look after yourself and look after others. I'm going to go let Hershey out. You can see he's scratching at the door there. So until Wednesday, take care. Cheers for now.
Ciao, guys.